Welcome to the lesson on graphing rational functions. We have two rational functions that we're going to graph. Let's start with the f function. F of x equals x plus 1 divided by x minus 3. We're going to plug this into our graphing calculator just to see what it looks like. You're going to type in the y equals button, which is at the top of the screen. And now note, because a rational function is a fraction, let's use our shortcut for our fraction button, which is the green button, alpha, and then the y equals. So it's basically the green button and F1. That's going to access these shortcuts. The first shortcut that we want to use is basically the fraction button. So it says number 1 is n/d. That stands for numerator over denominator. So I'm going to pick it. And the calculator then gives me this pretty print, which actually looks like a fraction. So I want to type in x plus 1. So the x button is to the right of the green button. Click it, plus 1. Now I'm finished with the numerator, so I'm going to press the right arrow key, and that'll take me automatically to the denominator. I'm going to type in x minus 3. Now I need to scroll to the right to get out from underneath that fraction, and I have this nice rational function. I want to make sure that my rational function gets on my screen. So let's check our viewing window. Go to zoom. That's at the top of the screen, right in the middle. And the best zoom window is Z standard, so which is a -10 to +10 viewing window. That's the one that I prefer, but we will work with this function some later on. So I'm going to either scroll down to pick zoom standard, or I can even just actually choose the number 6. And here is our function. This is a rational function. It has a horizontal and a vertical asymptote. I want you to notice that the vertical asymptote does not show up. On some graphing screens, the vertical asymptote will show, but you need to know that that little line connecting the bottom point on the left to the top point on the right is actually invisible. It is a programming error in your calculator. The new programming actually does not show that. So this is supposed to be clear. It is a vertical asymptote, a place where the graph cannot be. It's not a function if there's a coordinate right there. And then there's a horizontal asymptote, which again is invisible, but you can see by the function that it's not going to touch that either. All right. I'm going to go back to the y equals button. If I have already been graphing in my calculator and I don't have to pick the zoom window every time, if I've typed something in, I can simply go to the graph button, which is the far right button, press graph, and here's my function. Now let's go back to the y equals button and type in another function. So I'm going to clear this particular function out. So by pressing clear, and I'm going to start back over, and let's type in the second one, x squared minus 1 over x plus 1. So I need to access that fraction bar or the fraction button. I can go to alpha F1. If your calculator doesn't have the shortcut buttons, I'm going to quit out of this mode. I'm going to show you the way to type in this rational function and not use the shortcut buttons. So let's just type in the numerator. To type the numerator in, I'm going to press a parentheses. You have to tell the calculator which part of the function is the numerator. And the only way to tell the calculator that is to use a grouping symbol, either a parentheses or a bracket or a brace. I'm just going to use the parentheses button, and then I'm going to type in the numerator x squared minus 1. So I'm going to type the x button, which is right here by the alpha button. I can either use the exponent button to get to the squared, or I can use this shortcut button, which is x squared, which is the one I choose, and then subtract 1, minus 1. Now I have to, this is very important in this mode, I have to close the parentheses. The calculator won't know that that's the only part that's in the numerator without you telling it by closing the parentheses. Then we're going to press divided by. That's the fraction bar. It'll show up as a little fraction bar. It's the same thing in math. Divided is a way of saying, a fraction bar is a way of saying divided by. Again, you have to tell the calculator what's the denominator by using a parentheses. So the whole denominator is x plus 1. So I use an open parentheses. Then I type in x, then plus, and then 1, and now I'm going to close my parentheses to tell the calculator I'm done with that denominator, and I've already done my zoom window, which was zoom standard, so I'm just going to press graph. Now you may be asking yourself, why does that graph align and not the same kind of function that we just graphed earlier? That's because this function is a special function in that when you factor the numerator, it will cancel with the denominator. It creates this unique part of a graph called a hole. Well, we don't see a hole. So let me show you how to show the hole on your graph. We're going to go back to the zoom button. And we're going to go right here to number 4, which is zoom decimal. You just need to tell the calculator, I don't want to see every single point possible, every decimal point. I just want to see 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. That's what zoom decimal does. So I'm going to scroll down to number 4, and I'm going to pick it by pressing enter. And now a different screen comes up, but you can clearly see the hole in the graph. Zoom decimal is what shows up that hole in the graph. Now, be sure that you go back to Zoom Standard for your next graph. This is only true when you have a rational function that does cancel either a numerator or a denominator. That concludes our lesson on graphing rational functions.